This is the iPhone 11. No Pro, no Max, the most basic iPhone you can get right now. And for most people, it's the one to buy. So here are the 5 things you need to know about it. Number 1, it's cheaper, relatively. The iPhone 11 is $700. That's $300 cheaper than the Pro. And that does mean fewer cameras and less battery life, but it also means some weird stuff, like the bezels actually seem a lot chunkier. And the glass on the back, maybe the toughest yet, but it's also a huge thumbprint magnet and just feels kind of glossy and slippery compared to the Pro. But the biggest difference is the display, which brings us to number 2, the display. The iPhone 11 has a 6.1-inch LCD display that's a little bigger than the iPhone Pro and a little smaller than the Pro Max. It's a really pretty LCD display, but there are some noticeable differences between it and the Pro. Mainly, it's just not as bright, and it's probably not going to be as energy efficient. However, the thing I really noticed, I want you to come here. Now look right here where the display meets the bezel. It's just a little fuzzy and it's super distracting. Not distracting is this good boy. So let's talk about number 3, the image sensor. The camera sensor is a huge improvement. This is a 4K video where I'm shooting directly into the setting sun, but look at the detail. You can see every strand of fur on the dog, every grain of sand on the beach. The iPhone 11 has a new sensor, so you get 4K video up to 60 frames per second with a much better dynamic range. That means shots that should be totally blown out by the setting sun are nice and peaceful. It also means you can use the new night mode found only on the 11 and the Pro. The night mode lets you pull off shots that would otherwise be too blurry or dark, but you do have to choose between it and the flash, and it only works with one lens on the camera. Which brings us to the 4th thing you need to know about the iPhone 11. The cheap one only has 2 cameras on the back. Now one is the same 26mm lens found on the Pro, 10R, and 10S. The other is the equivalent of a 13mm lens on a full-frame camera. That's super wide, so photos are super dramatic, sometimes too dramatic. I occasionally feel like I'm just using a cool Instagram filter. Personally, I would have preferred to zoom in rather than out, but any flexibility is an upgrade over the single lens phones like the 10R and the 8. And speaking of upgrades, let's talk about the battery life. The 5th thing you need to know about the iPhone 11 is it has pretty solid battery life. I mean, it's not as good as the Pro or the Pro Max. They both lasted way longer on a charge. But it is better than my 2-year-old 10 and better than the 10R. And for $700, that's pretty good. Now, if you're really upset about the lack of the zoom or the okay battery life or the display that's just a little fuzzy around the edges, suck it up. Spend $300 more and get the Pro. But for everybody else, I honestly think the 11 is more than enough.